What's going on, everybody? It's Steve. We're here with the Season 13 VBL review. Let's get right into it. I had a good regular season, 6-1. Lost a camo in the semis. Did my videos a little bit differently this season. Did a first look in videos. If you were curious, those were real reactions every time. And then I asked what head office was cooking. And then I got into the team builder, something I often don't do, calcs off screen during the battle. I was never looking them up. They were always written down. And we got a little comment I made here on Jace's video where he said I was doing some spread move gimmick. And I replied, I'm playing normally and I'm building normally. Trust. And that was true, but it was phrased in a way that is suspicious. That's because I did have head office. And let's see who head office was.
Big surprise. It was me all along. Steve was playing normally. He was building normally, but he was building for my team. And I was building for him. So I think we did a pretty good job of hiding it. I don't think anyone caught on. Maybe they didn't say anything, but I think we were good.
Yeah, I think so too. And I got your camera up and it looks like it's working, so I'm going to go back to the slide and hopefully it keeps going.
Hopefully.
So, before the season, actually this started after we played for the first time last season. In your video you said that you were going to be maybe thinking about doing a gimmick this season. So I approached you after we were both eliminated, and I said, hey, let's do this thing where we build each other's teams every week.
Yeah, I was super down. I thought it was a great idea because I didn't want to do anything like super crazy because obviously I get eliminated in the round 1 of playoffs every season, so I didn't want to do anything that wouldn't even let me get the playoffs in the first place. So, but I thought it was pretty fun that you came up with this whole idea and then approached me with it because it meant that I didn't have to think about anything to do for the season. It was a fun challenge. We still got to pretty much build like normal and play like normal. It's just we didn't have to. I wasn't prepping with my own team.
Yeah.
So it was like a fairly straightforward gimmick, but one that was very interesting, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't even look at the matchup until like the day you gave me the paste.
Yeah, it was the same, and sometimes even like a day after. I did a lot less. I spent a lot of my time. I would say like 90% of my time was on prep, and then 10% was like looking at what you sent me, and then being like, what am I doing this week? And then taking like a couple notes on my own little note sheet and stuff, and then just like running it from there. So
yeah. So we drafted together. We originally bounced around an idea of like I would draft your team entirely. But then we basically just ended up drafting together. Built each other's teams, sent the paste and notes, and in general made no changes. We each gave each other options in the paste if we felt like they were necessary. There's one caveat there. Week 2, I asked you if I could use close combat on Braviary over Rock Slide.
Probably for the best.
Yeah, I did click close combat, and Rotom didn't come.
It did not matter, or it mattered in the sense that your change was good and for the best.
Yeah. But otherwise, I don't think any changes were made.
Not really, not on my end. I ran with pretty much whatever you gave me each week.
Yeah, and I noticed actually after the Jace match, you used the Mischievous. I gave you 2 Mischievous sets, and you used the one that was on the paste, where I think the other one was probably better. After that, I was like, okay, I need to actually put what I think is best on the paste.
Yeah, like and that's what I meant by when I said I would look at what you sent me, and that was like 10% of prep on my end for my matches. I would kind of like glaze over it, but I would usually assume that whatever you put first was like this is like the main idea, even if it wasn't necessarily,
it's a good assumption
built that way. Yeah. So, and I don't know. I think a lot of it was because I was spending more time on the prep because like I wanted to give you stuff that was like actually good in my opinion. Obviously, good is is a relative term depending on who's talking about sets and whatnot. But I felt like I could. I don't know. I don't know. I think we just have different brains on how to prep and stuff. So
Yeah.
but it was fun. I had a great time with it.
Okay, let's look at the team. Oh wait. Oh, the problems first. So
Oh yeah,
we made this plan, and then we end up in the same division, directly next to each other in the draft, and playing each other week 1.
Yeah, that was the last part of that was the spooky part where it's like, are you serious? How are we supposed to do this?
Yeah. So our week 1 match was completely open team sheet,
Mm-hmm.
which I imagine I have slightly more experience than you in that, because I did that one real life tournament.
I don't know that I've played open team sheets at all ever.
Yeah.
So I pretty much play my 1 week of my one match a week in draft, and like that's pretty much it. So, but it was funny because I think I remembered I originally was like, are we gonna like, we can't really accept open team sheets in our match because if we're recording, people will see that we accept. Well, I thought, I think originally I was like, we could do it for fun and just be like, oh, we agreed to it because it would be funny.
Yeah.
But then I think we ultimately decided like, nah, let's just pretend that we
Yeah.
don't know what's going on, which was kind of fun.
So we had our teams. My team, I wanted either a sand team with Rhyperior, or the other one I was thinking about was Regirock, or the Chestnut Thwacky was the other combo I wanted to go with.
Yeah, the good old grassy glide strat, which I imagine would have been pretty strong. Anything like with high priority or really fast speed with a lot of offensive output is pretty hard to stop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, ultimately you went with Rhyperior. I don't think any of the options were taken by the time it got to you, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So you kind of had like the first pick. Any of those first picks that you wanted could have been yours.
And a lot of the mons on my team didn't get picked in the other conference at all, I don't think. Other
That's
than
kind of
Rhyperior,
insane.
of course.
Yeah, with Sly.
And then on your side, you wanted a Flygon team.
I did, yes, yeah. And I know, I think because I wanted Flygon, I wanted Tinkaton to be my first round. Um, and there's really no substitute for Tinkaton technically that was on the board. There were a couple fairy types. I think Pheasantipity, I think, went first round. I think Jace took Pheasantipity round 1, I think. But ultimately I wanted a fairy steel type, which would have been Tinkaton, or I guess Tinkatuff, but like doesn't have Gigaton Hammer, is mostly kind of like a support mon. So um, I wanted to run it back with Tinkaton this season, just to because it had a complementary typing to Flygon, which was the main mon that I really wanted to try this season.
Yeah.
Because it's one of my favorite mons, but it is very underwhelming in general, and I think it only had a chance in low tier, so I figured this was my one chance to give it a shot. So
And I tried to force it because I knew you wanted to give it a shot. So I was like bringing it as much as I could.
yeah, reasonably, yeah. I mean, you did a great job with that, I would say. It came like pretty much every week except for like 1 or 2, I think. So
Yeah, I think it was the second last week, and then also playoffs. I think it wasn't there in
yeah, I
playoffs.
did not bring it playoffs, and yeah, I think it was one of the latter weeks. It didn't show up. So yeah, I
And
mean, it was fun.
being right next to each other too, we could plan out our picks in a way that you don't really get the opportunity to do in a draft very often.
Yeah, which might border on collusion, I guess, but I don't know. I
Yeah,
didn't feel
effort.
that way because we weren't really stepping on each other's toes, and we weren't really like making picks in a way that would put other people at a disadvantage.
Yeah,
It was just kind of like bouncing ideas off of each other.
yeah. Okay,
So
here are the notes. So this was the notes you gave me for the quarterfinals against Braff. And so the top snap there is just description of the matchup, what you expect Braff to bring. And then the bottom snap is only Houndstone.
oops.
So there's 5 more mons that come here, as well as notes on what mons you did not bring to the team and why.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the general format of how we gave each other notes. A bunch of calcs, what the mon's supposed to do, and then general game plans, and why the other mons didn't come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of usually the list of mons at the end, I think we usually both left them at the end, or maybe you put them in the beginning, I don't remember, but
Some of them I
the
put
list of mons that, yeah, the list of mons that didn't come, you didn't really have to write much for them, because I think most of the time we could kind of tell why they're not coming to the match, or it was just like a brief, like one sentence thing of like, hey, the matchup looks terrible,
Yeah.
not coming this week. So those were pretty easy to write down, but a lot of the detail I think for both of us went into why we ran the sets that we did and like what the general game plans were, plus some like general notes about like the matchup or the opponent's team with like weaknesses or things that they had going for them that would kind of make predicting what you think they're going to do a little bit easier. So
Yeah. And after this video drops, I will be dropping a link to the Google Doc. This was all done in Notepad, but I've put them all into a Google Doc if anyone wants to see what our notes looked like. It's 188 pages long.
and I'm sure it'll be atrocious to read with the formatting.
Yeah. There is it'll be particularly interesting for Jordan because I wrote 3 different teams for you to play against Jordan because I
Yeah.
had I was going on vacation or something, so
Mhm.
I made prep for 2 teams well in advance, and then Jordan made transactions, and I was like, oh shit! So I like hurriedly put together another one. So all
Here we
3 of those
go.
are in there.
Yeah. No, yeah, that was another thing was like the scheduling. We kind of had to we were kind of at the mercy of like each other's schedules, but then we also had to make sure we had enough time to prep for the other person comparatively between our two schedules for each of our opponents. So it was kind of like a compounded
Yeah.
scheduling, whereas some weeks it was just like I got like 2 days and not a lot of time in those 2 days to make it work. But I think for the most part we were pretty good about giving each other enough time to build some sort of coherent team.
Yeah,
So
I think it was my game against Slushy. You barely had any time to prep.
yeah, I remember I kind of had to cram that one out as fast as possible.
Yeah. I didn't
But
have any issues with timing for your matches. I'm always
oh
prepping way
yeah, because
ahead
I
because I'm
didn't.
a fiend.
Yeah, and most of the time I think if I was busy, it was usually I was busy on like a weekend, so I would just play on like a Friday or something before I left.
Yeah.
So it was never usually that big of a deal.
Okay, so let's get into talking about the actual teams. So what did Goose give me? Generally, it was Rhyperior, Mesprit, Hippopotas, Houndstone, +2, usually Braviary, but Galvantula was in there quite a bit as well. Sometimes Mesprit was, sometimes Lampent was better than Mesprit, but I would say generally at least Rhyperior, Hippo, and Houndstone. Very few gimmicks. There was the Fire Blast Rhyperior, which was super clutch against Jordan. The Stockpile Rocky Helmet Cramorant, which was amazing when it got hit by an Ice Punch from Swampert, and it took Rocky Helmet and the Gulp Missile and died. And then this Galvantula Berserker lead that you gave me against Camo, and that one didn't work out too hot, but in
Yeah.
general, no complaints on my side. A lot of good stuff in the moveset. Stab moves, protects. Nothing terribly surprising most weeks. I wouldn't say good speed
Mhm.
control with the Thunder Wave or Electro Web or String Shots. Uh, did I ever run Tailwind?
On Braviary,
Yeah,
I provided
you
it a
gave
lot of
it.
weeks.
Yeah,
I don't think you necessarily used it most of the time.
yeah. I don't know if I did.
I don't think you really needed it because usually Rhyperior was in back. So,
Yeah, and
but
usually Houndstone's out front. But
yeah.
most of the time, it was just enable Rhyperior and win. And as we will see in the stats later, that did work most of the time.
It was pretty straightforward. Yeah, I had a lot of. It was pretty similar most weeks, and I know we'll cover that, but
Yeah. So, Goose, what prep did you want to give me?
There were quite a few things that I would generally think about week to week that I wanted to run and could almost never justify bringing it. The first one was Cramorant with Surf plus Storm Drain Tatsugiri. Both of them are pretty much in the same speed tier. Cramorant's 85, Tatsugiri's 82, and like pretty. I think every single team we faced had at least one Mon, maybe more, that would outspeed this duo. And I feel like you would probably in this situation run like Scarf Cramorant to get the Surf off. Not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to, but it felt like one of these Mons needed Scarf in order to like outspeed and actually get the damage off. Otherwise, one of them is just gonna die. So it felt very difficult to bring that combo pretty much any week. And on most weeks, I think generally like the type chart had a pretty solid resistance to water. There were some weeks where like I could have justified it because it like water looked really good pretty much into the entire team. But even still, like the duo wasn't consistent enough in my opinion, at least like thinking about like turn ones. Like maybe I guess I could have built around it for like an end game scenario, but it felt like it would have been harder to position that way, so I would have had to like plan a lot of the moves in advance, and usually like things don't necessarily go exactly to plan, so I felt like it had to be a lead combo, and it just didn't feel consistent, especially since there was fake out most weeks, and like even if I run covert cloak, it can just you'd either be forced to Terra to survive a hit, and but then you'd be using Terra on like a Cramorant, or it wasn't like dealing the necessary damage that I thought would have justified me using it.
Yeah,
Tatsugiri for the most part was kind of disappointing a lot of weeks. Yeah, at
I'd
least
say.
in prep, like at +1 with like a Draco KO a lot of stuff. Yeah, but like getting that set up seemed like a lot of investment when I could just run like Houndstone Hippo,
Yeah, yeah,
and it just does that job better. So I don't know, that was a duo that I wanted to bring most weeks, and I know you mentioned it when you first drafted it, but I could never fit it in, unfortunately. And then the next one is Sucker Punch Galvantula. Galvantula has a really interesting moveset. It has a lot of like fun utility moves. It's never really gonna run Sucker Punch because its offensive stat is like what 60 or something
yeah,
terrible.
something around there.
So unless like you want to like pick off a Mon that lives on Sash or something, or something that's at really low health, probably not worth justifying a slot for it. But there were quite a few weeks where I thought it would be interesting to try and get like a Sucker Punch, min 0 IV attack Sucker Punch from Galvantula, which would do like no damage to Mesprit or even Lampent. Um, and then have one of the two of them, or even Houndstone, for example, have weakness policy and just like have them go insane. But the hardest part was I wanted speed control from the partner. Like it would need speed control to actually work because Mesprit, Houndstone, and Lampent are like in that awkward speed stat range where it's like it's not really outspeeding anything, but it would kind of need Trick Room up. But even if Trick Room was up, like there are plenty of slower Mons that could also be faster. So it would have required some very, very precarious positioning, and I didn't feel that I could provide the lead necessary to like lead into that. So kind of like with Cramorant and Tatsugiri, like I couldn't think of a reliable way to get that scenario set up, and it just felt very inconsistent. But it would have been fun to get that up, just because like I feel like a weakness policy on, especially on like Houndstone or Mesprit, would just like chunk through teams.
Yeah,
Houndstone kind of just did that, week to week in general anyway. But I don't know, Mesprit 2 could have just like spiraled like a +2 mystical power, just like constantly boosting until it's like at +4 or whatever. Would probably just destroy teams unless there's like a Terra Dark or a natural Dark type.
yeah. Plus
Um,
the
and
coverage,
then
Ice Beam,
yeah,
Thunderbolt, whatever.
yeah, exactly. Just like mystical power plus like maybe a coverage move or two, and then just go ham from there. But 80 speed is a little weird for Trick Room too, so it's kind of like that awkward speed stat.
Yeah,
And then Steely Spirit, Berserker, plus any partner that could Terra Steel with like a steel move. Steel, unfortunately, is not a very good offensive type. So, like, I mean, you can't necessarily like base everything off the type chart, but like most teams had like at least like 3 or 4 resistances on like good mons that you would bring, like that I was expecting to be brought into a match that would resist steel. So it's like even though you're getting the 50% from Steely Spirit, plus like if you Terra Steel, you get another boost, and then if you're, now they're getting that boost from Stab, Braviary Terra Steel Ironhead would be pretty cool, or like Rhyperior Heavy Slam. But again, it was like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't like that my team couldn't really use Steely Spirit either, because it's a pretty cool ability.
Yeah, and like that 50% buff is a lot of damage, especially if it's combined with a mon that is steel or has Terra Steel as an option. Like the multipliers kind of go crazy. And even with resisted hits, it can do pretty well. But it was just, I don't know, the mons that would want to Terra Steel, like Rhyperior doesn't really want to Terra Steel a lot of the time because it's weak to ground.
And
So
fighting.
yeah, and like I felt like Rhyperior with the end game wants like a defensive Terra that is reliable and to what I expect is going to be super effective. And most weeks like ground is a fairly good option into your team.
Yeah.
Just in general for coverage, although grass and water were pretty good too. But yeah, I don't know. That it just seemed Berserker's also not sticking around for very long. It's not that bulky, so it felt like kind of tough to justify, Terra Steel, Braviary, Ironhead, or whatever, when Berserker may not even be on the field for that combo unless you lead with it. Which I guess you could lead like Fake Out Tailwind, but a lot of times I think Berserker didn't come more weeks than it did come because a lot of times there was like a faster fake out or Steel wasn't very good offensively. So
Yeah.
I had very limited opportunities, in my opinion, to bring Berserker in the first place, and bringing it for Steely Spirit with like a Terra Steel or whatever seemed a little too gimmicky to be good, if
Yeah.
that makes sense, or it seemed like
Definitely.
unreliable.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I also just wanted to give more moveset variety because obviously, you're known as the guy who brings all kinds of fun stuff and wacky things that typically works. Sometimes it doesn't, but a lot of times you bring some funky stuff that works. So I wanted to kind of try my hand at trying to bring some funky stuff that would live up to your own brain. But a lot of times I think I just fell into how I tend to play the game, which is like very consistent with like maybe having like a couple niche options week to week that are like kind of fun, but not necessarily anything that special. And I think that particularly applies to Braviary and Mesprit because like they have Braviary doesn't have, I mean both of them don't really have that many different moves that you could reliably use, but like there were definitely some sets I probably could have made with them that would have been fun. Rhyperior too to a certain extent, but like his good stuff was so good that it was hard not to bring.
Yeah.
Like high horsepower and rock slide were like pretty much covered every type, so it was extremely difficult for me to not just slap those two on and then consider whether or not I wanted to protect a lot of weeks. And then if I was running Assault Vest, obviously not. But if I wasn't running Assault Vest, it's like okay, protect high horsepower rock slide covers everything. What's the coverage move from that point on? So
Yeah.
I
Which
probably could have
punch
tried.
or which mega horn do I get?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How do I? Yeah, it pretty much week to week that fourth slot would change, depending on what I thought I needed an answer for, like a mon that I thought would be a problem. But
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of times I think I kind of fell into my own building standard, and maybe I kind of pushed myself out of my comfort zone a little bit with what I wanted to try to like look at other options that maybe I wouldn't normally consider myself. But a lot of times I think I just ran with what I thought was consistent and good because I think I cared more about trying to make sure I gave you the options to win versus giving you like fun and wacky stuff that might tank your season. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
And like this is why it's a good challenge for us, because like we do build completely differently. You are very
Yes.
standard solid, and I'm just a crazy person. Uh, and hey, it was my best regular season since season 8, I think.
Yeah, and I
So it
mean
worked out.
I made it into playoffs, which is with a pretty solid record at 5-2, which is tied for my best record.
That's something we haven't
Uh,
mentioned. We finished top 2 in our group.
let's
Yeah.
go. We take those.
Of course, we're
So I
both
think it
out now,
worked.
but
Yeah, it worked out.
yeah. Some things I wanted to use. You mentioned Cramorant, Tatsu, Surf Spam. You got Lightning Rod Rhyperior next to that to protect against electric attacks. Tatsugiri as a general water counter. I think this is something that would have definitely helped against Vaporeon. Less so against the Lapras team because it has
Mm.
Freeze Dry. But I think we were thinking about Tatsugiri in completely different ways, where you wanted to do that surf spam, whereas I would have just brought it with like taunt, protect, Draco, something else to just sit there next to Rhyperior if I could. Uh,
Mhm.
Galvantula Discharge plus Lightning Rod, Meteor Beam, Rhyperior. When you're at +2 special attack on turn 1, that Meteor Beam is gonna OHKO a lot of things. And I kind of gave you uh, I gave you the Meat Beam Bastiodon to like kind of hope that you would look into Meat Beam Rhyperior.
It almost worked too because I thought about it, but I think a lot of times I was like, I don't know. I don't think I feel really weird. It's got like 40 base special attack, which I mean, Bastion has trash special attack too, so
Yeah.
I should have just done it, but I got scared.
Fisher, you never gave me Fisher on Hippo, which is a little surprising.
I really that was another move that I really thought about it, but I was like, man, that's like 30% unreliable. Probably don't need it, and I should have just slapped it on some weeks. I'm sure some weeks it would have been good to have.
And then Sheer Force Special Braviary in the Rain. That's something I suggested Poppin do. And when Poppin did it, it clicked Rain Dance once in 2 games and died. So, not very good, as it turns out.
Yeah, sheer force is something I wanted to bring on Braviary, but like the
Its
moves that
physical
it
move pool is
gets,
not good for Sheer Force.
yeah, it has like very few options for it, and its moveset would be so whack with it. So yeah, I don't know. I really tried to think about it, but like that's why I also that was one of the times where I was considering like Ironhead and stuff like that next to
Oh, yeah.
Berserker with Terra Steel Ironhead could be cool, but I was like, ain't no way I'm gonna be able to set this up reliably.
Yeah. Scarf, Helping Hand, Terra Steel,
True,
Iron Head, Sheer Force.
true.
That's so many multipliers.
That's a lot of that's a lot of damage.
What do we got next? What I gave you.
Oh yes, yeah. There was nothing specific that I actually, because I was racking my brain for stuff that stood out as like, oh, this was terrible. But I mean, pretty much every week I like whatever you sent me, I looked at it and I was like, yep, sounds good. Like that's kind of like in line with what I was thinking, especially like in the general thoughts. I think we tended to be good at picking out what we thought our opponents had for weaknesses on their team and like how to utilize that to our advantage and kind of find a path to victory. So yeah, most weeks I thought the prep you sent me was good. Everything made sense to me. The numbers were there in the calcs that you sent me. And then I think the part that I enjoyed the most was every week I was like, oh, what the heck am I gonna get for some wacky stuff this week? So like the tech or sets or whatever that you would send me, I'd be looking through to see. I would usually open the paste first just to see like what was in there first. So like the weeks where you sent me like I don't know special Bastiodon or like Sunny Day Flygon into solar power Heat Wave Charizard, I was just like okay, let's
I,
do this because I
I,
know like setting Sun with a 100 base speed mon and then using another 100 base speed mon to take advantage of it is just like, oh, you just run a faster mon and like that combo sucks. But I mean, pretty much the prep and stuff that you sent me with all of these strong options ended up like working pretty well when I brought them. So I thought it was overall a really fun learning experience just to kind of see how you approached the game because with every paste and every note sheet you would send me, I'd be able to read through and see kind of where your head was at and what you thought would be good and what you expected like the opponents to bring and kind of what you prepped for. So I thought it was a pretty big learning experience because it forced me to play with a team with sets that you would send me that I probably wouldn't normally run on my own. So I
yeah.
thought it was a lot of fun.
And I think this is a good time to mention it, but I think your team suits my build style more than your build style, whereas my team suits your build style more than my build style. Uh,
Yes, yeah, that was something that I thought of as well because like your team was super strong and consistent with like the options that it had. So like I could run similar sets each week and they were strong enough to still just work. Whereas my team had like a bajillion options in move pool options that you could run. So yeah, I would agree. I would say that your team was more suited to my build style, and that my team had so many various options and weird setups and stuff that you could kind of just like play around in a sandbox of options and figure out what you thought would be fun or good to bring in general.
Yeah.
So I would agree.
It was fun for me to prep, that's for sure.
It's fun for me to get the prep and read it.
Prep I wanted to give, we talked about this briefly before, just in Discord, but Boomburst, Terranormal, Flygon next to your Soundproof, Bastiodon, and Mischievous. But the special stat of 80 is just not there. And I say that after I gave you Meteor Beam, Bastiodon twice. I never gave you Disquake. Maybe I did,
No.
but like not as a main option. I know I gave you discharge at some point, but like it was never a focal point strategy. That's mainly because of the speeds. I think usually you want your discharge to go first so you can get that paralysis chance. Terranormal, Facade, Quick Feet, Toxic Orb, Mighty Anna. I brought that up, I think, against Pancake. Yeah, the damage wasn't there though.
Yeah.
Belly Drum or Dragon Dance Charizard. Belly Drum especially is really hard to get off, but you do have Elekid plus Fake Out. Dragon Dance could have worked more reliably, I think. Dragon Cheer in either direction, Charizard or Flygon, because they both have Overheat or Draco Meteor. And Chlorophyll Blossom. Never brought it, even when I was running Sun teams. It's really slow.
Yeah, and I think the weeks that you like the weeks that you gave me Sun, I think were terrible matchups for Blossom. So
yeah,
is what it is.
That was often the first mon I left off of teams. I like Blossom, but every week it was like, well, it gets hit super effectively by 9 out of 11 mons, so.
Is this mon worth tearing, or is it worth just leaving on the bench?
Yeah. What Goose wanted to use?
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That pretty much everything you listed was what I would have wanted to use, because I know we had talked about a few of those. But outside that, I didn't really have anything particular that I wanted to use that you hadn't already mentioned. So stuff like Boom Burst, Flygon, or Dragon Cheer and stuff, or even Disquake would have been stuff that I probably would have considered in prep too. But ultimately, if it a lot of weeks, I can see why some of those wouldn't necessarily work very well. So yeah, you pretty much gave me everything that I would have wanted to use, but also probably would not have thought of. So I didn't really have anything that I missed out on, I feel like, other than what you've already listed.
Your thoughts on building my team?
Oh, okay. Yes. That was I think we touched upon it a little bit earlier, but your team has a lot of very consistent options and like some pretty, like with the sand mode, especially like with Hippo Houndstone, like it was so hard not to just slap those two as a lead, and I'm pretty sure most weeks I gave you that duo as an option to lead with, as one of the lead options, and just like clicking Helping Hand with Hippo, and then usually Poltergeist would, like, especially with like a offensive boosting item like Life Orb or Choice Band or whatever, just does so much damage, and half the time you wouldn't even need an offensive boosting item for Houndstone. I know some weeks I don't think I gave you
That was Clear
Life
Amulet
Orb or whatever.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, I think some weeks it was like Clear Amulet, and like Helping Hand Poltergeist was enough to just like pick up Okos, or at least like, especially some teams were fairly bulky or surprisingly bulky most weeks compared to the calcs that I ran. So they would live some hits, but in the calcs it was like, unless you're investing a ton in physical defense and HP, like the mod, like that duo would just like nuke something. So I was expecting to see more, especially after the first few weeks. I was expecting to see more no item mons or like Terranormal mons to kind of counteract that, but like that didn't really
Shout out
happen.
Camo.
So I kind of just, yes, yeah, exactly. So I kind of just kept giving the option to you because it was like a pretty good failsafe as a lead. If if things kind of went awry, you could just like lead that and then just like Helping Hand Poltergeist stuff to death.
Yeah.
So, or like Whirlwind or Roar stuff out with Hippo if like Trick Room was gonna go up, and then you'd still just like chunk something for like 70-80% without helping hand and stuff. So I don't know. That duo was really tough to not bring. Rhyperior was super consistent, which is why like pretty much every week it was high horsepower plus rock slide, and then usually protect. But some weeks I don't think I had protect, especially if I think I ran assault vest like once.
Yeah.
Or maybe not at all, but I thought I did it once
I think
because
you
I
did.
thought I remember there being a week without protect. But and then you got like Mesprit, where I'm pretty sure every single time I gave you Mesprit, it had mystical power as an option.
Yep.
That was one of the 4 moves every single time, and then Braviary I think was always Brave Bird.
The
And
first 3
then
weeks, it was only Brave Bird, Close Combat, Protect, and Tailwind.
Tailwind.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it was like these ones. I was just like, what does Braviary do really well? And it's like Brave Bird and Close Combat, and then like Protect. I was like, sure, why not? And then Tailwind, obviously for speed control, which I don't think ended up getting used very often. Even the weeks that I built the team to go fast, a lot of times I don't really think you needed
I think I
the
brought it against
Tailwind.
you. I think I clicked it against you. We both
Yeah,
set up Tailwind.
I don't remember how like what happened in our match. I just remember that I got destroyed. I don't really remember anything. It was a blur. I kind of just like took the L and was like, well, I don't know what happened, but we lost. But yeah, it was I don't know, those 5 especially. Hippo like has a very limited move pool as well, so I feel like I kind of exhausted it other than like Fissure
That was the
or like
Mon who you gave me the most moves on, the most different moves on.
Hippo. Yeah, I felt like I ran through most of it because it has like some decent options for specific tech. Like
Yeah.
Whirlwind is good to have, / Roar is good to have in certain situations.
You gave me
High
Scorching
horsepower is
Sands, which is
good.
cool.
Body press is good in certain scenarios. It has like some weird like Scorching Sands and some other special moves like Muddy Water. It gets um, Helping Hand was always good to have just as a quick option because it's so slow if Trick Room wasn't up. But and for like pairing it with Houndstone. But um, like after that, other than like Fissure, a lot of the moves when I was looking at it, I was like, what the heck else do I give this thing other than like Helping Hand and high horsepower?
Yeah. Realistically, it's
Um,
going to be Helping Hand, High Horsepower, Yawn, probably. Yawn or Roar, plus one
yeah,
more. Protect.
yeah. I don't even think did I even give you Protect on Hippo at all any week? I don't know if I did.
I think you did. We'll have to check.
Maybe I did once or twice. I remember most weeks I'd be like, I'm not gonna give Protect to Hippo because like it's already very bulky with Eviolite, and also you probably don't really care as much
Yeah.
about Hippo sitting on the field, and most opponents didn't really care about Hippo sitting on the field that much because it wasn't really doing that much. Um, High horsepower is good stab and would do like decent damage, but it wasn't like the main threat on your team. Usually everyone else was worried about literally all the other mons in
Yeah.
the 6 that you would bring during the week. But yeah, I don't know. It was tough to not bring very consistent stuff each week because your team was very consistent at what it did.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say was, I mean, I think most other coaches in our division had at least one mon that was faster than 108. So
Except for J-Star.
Yes, except for Jace. And pretty much if I wanted to go faster, it was pretty much like Covert Cloak, Galvantula into Electro Web or String Shot or Thunderwave, or it was like lead Houndstone Hippo to outspeed everything. So I don't know. It like those were like the 2 options if I wanted to go fast. Granted, they did work very well. Houndstone Hippo, obviously we've talked about already, does really well. And Galvantula, like its typing is actually surprisingly useful. And if I invested in some bulk and speed, it was often the second fastest mon on the field. And with Covert Cloak, like you can't like speed drop it, so it's pretty much guaranteed to go second. And then you could just like string shot Thunderwave, Electro Web or whatever, and then you have speed control from there. But there were some weeks where it was very difficult to like, especially against Camo with like 3 mons had like 110 speed.
Yeah.
So I was like, Galvantula is like Covert Cloak and speed control with like T-Wave or whatever. String shot was kind of like what I was thinking. But
Yeah, I knew that would be a rough matchup. That's why I didn't
yeah,
pick
that
him.
was it was it was a tough one. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it was like your team was very good in Trick Room. Hippo being the slowest mon a lot of weeks was really nice. Rhyperior was like usually the slowest mon and sometimes tied, but that was like good enough for it anyway. And then some weeks you could go fast with I know Tailwind wasn't brought a lot, but like Galvantula has like a
Yeah.
wide array of speed control options that are very reliable. That overall, it wasn't something that I really wanted, like that I felt like you needed to make transactions for. So I didn't really bring it up, but it probably would have been just nice to have like that one extra option to outspeed stuff, just in general. But
Yeah. Agreed.
it was pretty good otherwise.
My thoughts on playing, I do think I had, if not the best draft, one of the best drafts. Because no other team has the immediate offense of a Houndstone next to Hippo. Because there's little counter weather. There were some pranksters, but then your pranksters clicking a weather move on turn 1, and I have 2 Mons doing something else. I needed better water or ice type counterplay. My only losses were to Vaporeon and Articuno. I think from the other conference, I would have a really hard time against Poppin and Sukaba as well. Sukaba has the Blastoise. Nobody on our side has Blastoise. He also has Breloom, which against Slushy was a huge problem too. More top heavy than I've ever had. It, in terms of games played, we'll see the stats later, but it was Rhyperior, Hippo, Houndstone, Braviary for the most part. I'm never drafting Mesprit again. Even when you gave it to me, it basically didn't play. It was like 6 out of 20 games or something. Maybe that's a team problem. I don't know. But like when you gave me Lampent, I actually played Lampent.
Mhm.
Everything else I liked well enough, and things like Cacturn, Berserker, Tatsugiri, and Cramorant. Even if they don't come, I think they're enough of a threat that people have to think about them, just because of the combo ability
Mhm.
and the defensive synergy there with Tatsu and Rhyperior especially.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, Mesprit was tough too because its move pool is also fairly limited and like it has stuff that it can do, but it felt like the best thing it could do is just click Mystical Power or Trick Room.
Yeah, or
So
Helping
I don't
Hand.
know. Yeah, it was tough.
My thought on Goose's teams. I felt like we had a disadvantage or an even matchup most weeks, mainly because of the speed issues, where your only Trick Room setter wanted Eviolite. I gave you Mental Herb quite a few times, and then people just weren't bringing Taunt, so I was like, okay, Eviolite it is. Uh, 2 base 100 speed Mons. As you already said, that's outsped by a lot. You didn't have any immediate hard hitters without Choice Scarf. Like a Passimian with Scarf would be the best one. Otherwise, it would need to be like Gigaton Hammer, which obviously does a shitload of damage, but you can protect that every other turn. Eel needs setup. Cloyster needs setup. Bastiodon needs setup. Flygon just honestly doesn't do damage. Charizard needs a sun. So it was a lot of combos, and I imagine it was hard for people to prep for. Uh, and you still went 5-2, but I felt like I had to bring out the heat to win, and I think I would definitely not draft. The only mons I would want for your team again would be Cloyster, Bastiodon. Uh, Elekid was good. I would not draft Tinkaton. That that mon is a trap, I think, because you want Fake Out, you want Gigaton Hammer, and then what? Do you take your coverage move? Do you take your speed control? Do you take your encore? Do you take Play Rough as your other stab? Do you take Knockoff? It's like ultimate 4 move slot syndrome, and then it also only has 75 attack.
Yeah, he's not doing a lot of damage without Gigaton.
Yeah. But we'll see when we get to the stats. It's those mons that I mentioned, the Bastiodons, Cloisters, those really carried you through, while the other ones kind of were just like doing chip damage and doing status and stuff like that. Like your Sleep Powder, Blossom, and Paralysis on the Electros.
Mhm.
So my view on the team is a little more negative. However, you still went 5-2. So obviously it
We take
worked.
those. Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, you prepped really well because if I didn't have the tools to win, I probably would not have won. You know what I mean? So I'd say you
And
prepped really well.
I forgot to mention the advantage. The two matches I thought we had the advantage were Slushy, whose team could not hit fairy types or ghost types, and Jordan, whose team was incredibly weak to fire. It wasn't weak to fire, it had no fire resistances other than
Which
Inteleon, which is basically being weak to fire when you have Charizard in the sun.
yeah.
Your thoughts on playing your team?
I feel like I tend to be too high on my teams. Maybe not from other people's perspectives, but I myself have traditionally been very happy with the teams that I draft every season, which usually results in me not using any of my transactions most seasons. This not being an exception. Um, but I mean, that being said, like I liked all the teams that I had, all the ones that I had on my team, and like the options that I felt that my team had at your disposal. I definitely needed better speed control. It was called out in the Olds draft review. Um, and I think not only the speed control, but also like an immediately threatening offensive mon, which you just mentioned, a few slides ago. Both of those were called out in the Olds review, which I think I also knew when I drafted my team that I was missing those things. I think I just when I happened to like run through the team and build stuff with all these synergies, I think I kind of just figured it would be good enough. And I mean, based on what you gave me and how the season turned out, it ended up being good enough
Yeah,
most weeks. But I think it definitely probably would have been easier or would have been nicer just to have, you know, something fast and, immediately threatening or just in general some speed to like have better speed control and support for other mons that would need it. Like base 100 mons probably would love the additional speed support instead of having to be the speed support.
yeah.
So yeah, I think those were two like really big callouts that both you have said and also in the old draft review
It
called out
is. It's
originally, which
also hard to know, right? It's a new format. We
yeah.
banned half the decks. Who knows what you need?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So like I don't know, looking back, it's like maybe halfway through the season I should have gone back to the drawing board and looked at some transactions on the board. I think I remember briefly glancing. Um, but I didn't really think I saw anything that I would make big transactions for because it would have changed the dynamic of like my entire team. And I felt like what I had on my team was better than what I could have made transactions for. But again,
Yeah,
maybe you and I could have like at least chatted about it and thought of
yeah. We did
like
not
maybe had some brainstorms or something.
on
But
either side.
yeah, yeah, for both. But yeah, I don't know. I thought my team was fun to play with. It was always fun to see what kind of heat you gave me week to week. Um, just in general. So I had a great time playing my team. I thought it was a good team in general, if not a little bit reliant on setup. But otherwise, I thought it was a fun team, and I'm glad I drafted it
Yeah.
and played the season with it. So
It was definitely fun to prep with, because I basically had to look at every single one of your mons every time, whereas you only had to look at like four of mine before you started having to actually plan what the other
mhm.
two were. Whereas I'm
Yeah.
looking at like 9 to 11 mons every week. And I'm like, why don't I bring this?
Is there a better option? Yeah, I mean my building for you was like pretty much guaranteed to slap Rhyperior, Hippo, and Houndstone on the team, and then the other slots were pretty much like flex slots that ended up being very similar week to week. But yeah, Rhyperior, Hippo, and Houndstone were pretty much like guaranteed
Yeah,
slap them on the team, and but the biggest thing to worry about was like EVs and running calcs to see
yeah.
what I should run and where the investments should be. So
Weekly heat. We did have quite a few appearances, one of us more than others. Uh, I had that Fire Blast Rhyperior against Jordan, and James robbed us of the Cramorant on the weekly heat. And then we had on your side the Sunny Day, Tailwind, Flagon, and Charizard Heatwave against Jordan. Iron Ball after you, Blossom for Jace, which worked in and out of Trick Room because he knocked off the Iron Ball. That was handy.
mhm.
Meteor Beam Bastiodon, and Room Service Acrobatics Electros. And then the Zap Cannon Blunder Policy Electros, which I never intended for you to click Zap Cannon twice, but it actually won you the game.
Yeah. Game 2 was crucial.
So,
Holy moly.
a lot of
Yeah.
appearances here.
Yeah. I think, I don't know. I feel like this is to be like for everyone else who's like seeing this now, this makes a lot of sense because I think traditionally most of the time I'm not making weekly heat with the teams that I build. Maybe I'll get one or two in there with some fun stuff that I build around that's like very matchup specific, but most of the time I tend to be fairly consistent. So I don't make weekly heat very often versus you only making it twice in a season is like unheard of. So I think this will make a lot of sense once people hear this. So
yes. Stats. My team on the right, your team on the left. The one that stands out to me, your mom with the worst win percentage is Charizard at 4 and 7.
sheesh.
But it's still your kill leader. Tinkaton dying basically every game.
No surprise there.
Flygon, Mischievous with even records. Bastiodon with the big 9 and 2 KD. Cloyster was 6 and 3. Everything else is basically even. And then on my side, basically carried by that Rhyperior. Big Hippo with the 10 kills, and it added 3 more against Camo, so it's actually ahead of Houndstone. 13 to 12, I believe, and Rhyperior picked up 2 more. But yeah, we can see basically your team very wide. My team, the top 5 plus Galvantula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty much kind of how I expect. Like as the season was progressing, that's pretty much this is what I would have expected going into most weeks. Looking like at the final result, this is more or less what I would have thought would happen. With like you would have your 4 mons that would pretty much do the bulk of the KOs. The Hippo is pretty surprising, I will say, but I guess it's bound to happen
They
if
got a
it's
lot of
pretty much
Sandstorm kills.
yeah. So I feel like its existence is probably good enough. Plus, it like enables 2 other mons, Houndstone for speed, and Rhyperior likes the sand up just for chip damage, but also for the special defense boost. So I am surprised that it got as many kills as it did, but at the same time, I guess I should have thought of like passive sand as counting as its KOs too.
Yeah, realistically, those are Houndstone's KOs, but
yeah,
most of them, I imagine.
Yeah, did most of the work.
Yeah. And then our Terras, we were talking about this briefly. You had 3 no Terra games. I had 2. Almost all of my Terras going towards Rhyperior. That looks like 50% at least. Mm-hmm. Yours is fairly spread out. Bastiodon's the big winner there, 4 and 3, or 4 Terras and 3 wins.
Mm-hmm. Who knew that Rock Steel is terrible?
Yeah. You had a lot more closer games than I did. Jace, Wotan, and Daddy. Mm-hmm. My game versus Daddy was also very close, and against Slushy as well, which I probably was the only team with a bad Slushy matchup. Or not bad, but
yeah,
less great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, your team was, like we've talked about, very strong and inconsistent. So I feel like most weeks you could kind of just stick to the game plan and just win. Whereas I think a lot of especially some of those close games that I had, like I remember versus Jace in particular. I remember I took they sent me their pace, and I think I ran some calcs in my video, and like I think I only won that game 3 based on like
it was a roll.
Some very tight rolls. Yeah, like that Swampert when I think I was +4, like a +4 body press into full HP Swampert was like a 56.3% chance to Oko or something, and I ended up getting the coin flip there. So, and then like I think the same roll I think for Executor or Alolan Executor was like 93%, but like still a percentage that I like still a roll I had to hit, even if it was more likely than not by most margins. So like that week in particular, I remember like I won that because the rolls went in my favor. So I don't know. Yeah, a lot of my matches felt a lot closer, and like the EV spreads and the rolls for a lot of stuff, and like turn to turn decisions felt like were extremely important for my team because my team like really needed each turn to go well for me. Not that I thought my team was bad by any means, but like you said, it was like a lot of like gimmicky stuff or like setup turns or whatever. So I needed pretty much every opportunity I could get to do well.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that my numbers were a lot closer together versus yours seemed to be a lot of. There's like you got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 2-0s. So like I don't know. Yeah, your
It
team.
was a
You
good season.
back to what you said at the beginning. Yeah, your team was very strong. Definitely one of the best teams that was drafted this season.
And then we got moves, terra types, items. So unique moves. In my games, you gave me 83 different moves. I gave you 107. This is not including the semifinal game against Pancake, just so we have the same number of sets. Terra types were about equal, 34 unique terra types for me, 35 for you. Unique items. This is specifically like different items total, not like I brought Eviolite on Hippo and Lampant. Those are still the same item.
Gotcha.
So 19 for me, 22 for you. Realistically, there's only like 15 good items in the game. And team compositions. This was the big one. You had a different one every week. I think every odd-numbered week at the start of the season, you gave me the Hippo, Houndstone, Rhyperior, Braviary, Mesprit lineup of 6. I started making jokes in my video that, well, we're running these 6 again.
Yeah, every odd week, is that what you said? Every odd numbered week?
Yeah.
That's the gimmick. Here we go.
Yeah. It's like, Jace, get ready. I'm bringing these 6. But I think, again, I don't think this has anything to do with either of us. I think it's team-based.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you probably would have brought more wacky, insane stuff that I would have not even considered bringing with your team, and you probably would have made it work. But too bad you had to deal with what I gave you.
We talked about this earlier on Discord. I said that I'm sure I would have forced Tatsugiri Cramorant, and I would have lost a lot more games because of it. So, I guess my closing thoughts. Thanks for all of your hard work. Thanks for joining me on this mission, and you gave me a great season. You gave me great prep, and it worked, clearly.
Yeah, I would say likewise to you. I mean, this was one of the most fun, seasons I've had. Every season is fun, obviously, but I would say this is probably the most fun I've had in a season. For very different reasons, mostly because I no longer had to prep for my own team. It felt like I would still get nervous, but it felt like it took the pressure off.
Yeah, it's my fault if you lose.
Well, that's not how I thought of it, but I think the way I approach the season just in general, like mentally, was I wanted to build as best as I could with the tools that I thought would enable you to win each week, so that you could have a super good season in general. Because I feel like I would have been happier to see you go further and have a really good season, and I had like a dumpster fire season, versus like the other way around. Because if I had a fantastic season but I was giving you prep and you were getting like dunked on all season, I would have felt terrible even if my season was going really well.
Yeah.
So I wanted to focus really hard on making sure I gave you the tools to win, and like analyzing each like weekly team well enough to give you tools to win. Because I figured, I mean, even some weeks, like I think you deviated from the general plan options that I gave you quite a few weeks. Not in like every game, but like there were some games week to week where you would like kind of just run with what you thought was the best. Yeah, exactly. You would go into it and make your own game time decisions and adapt based on how the game was going. And like you're obviously really good at the game. I think pretty consistently make playoffs every season. So as long as I was giving you tools and like well thought out ideas and builds that were effective, I felt like you would, make playoffs like usual. So that was
Yeah,
pretty much my main goal throughout the season. And then obviously when my season was going pretty well too, I was like, well, we'll take that. I'll take that as a consolation prize.
yeah,
So,
that's nice.
um,
We end up top of the
yeah, and like
conference.
yeah, and thank you for all the time that you put in with the builds and for giving me the most weekly heat appearances ever. Probably better this season than like any two seasons I've had in the past combined since weekly heat started. So, um,
And
yeah, yeah, I appreciate all your time and effort.
I think it was really good, um, just on an engagement level. Like both of us were really engaged in each other's games, whereas usually you don't care all too much about what somebody else is doing in the league. Like I
Hmm.
watch everybody's. If you put out a video, I'm watching it.
Same
Uh,
here.
if if you post a game to the replays, I'm watching the replays. But outside of that, I generally don't care that much.
Yeah.
I'll watch all the content. Uh, but like this was like having two teams. You had to root
Hmm.
for one, and you had to play your own, and it was really engaging for the whole season.
Yeah, it was because we were both invested in each other's seasons, obviously, because we had a hand in both. So I would agree. Yeah, that was the fun part too, especially because we would like send each other, if our videos couldn't go public, especially for like the first playoff
Playoffs, yeah.
round, we both sent our videos to each other as unlisted before they were actually revealed on the on the playoff segment. So we got to see like in advance kind of what happened, which for you was good news, and for me was like, oh, what have I done? Like, oh no, I don't think I played very well versus Pancake. I know the matchup was like really tough, but it
It's a
was just fun
misclick.
seeing your side of the video versus Brath because I was popping off when you sent me the video. I got to watch the whole thing.
Yeah,
Pretty much like I think the next morning you sent it over and I got to see it. So
yeah,
that felt really good to see, kind of just like basically as close to live as possible.
yeah. All right, that's it from us. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you made it through, this is slightly over an hour at this point. Hopefully you enjoyed. Peace.